for me to be, oh, there's the recording. I was about to tell you, I was about to warn you all that we're about to press record. So first of all, is anybody unhappy with us recording this session? Everyone's okay. Good, that's fine. Just wanted to check that. Okay, so it's an absolute pleasure for me to be starting off. I'm just kicking off and saying some opening remarks, doing a wee bit of the kind of housekeeping before I hand over to Julie Ashworth this evening. So from an IOD perspective, we're running this event this evening in partnership with Women on Boards, and we are absolutely thrilled that IOD as a whole has a really great partnership with Women on Boards established last year. And that means that we're doing some fantastic activity in Scotland. So this is our kind of second event with Women on Boards in Scotland, and lots more to come. So delighted because we have members of Women on Boards and members of IOD present this evening. So really great to kind of see that kind of collaboration happening. And well, of course, we're having it this week, right? Because it's International Women's Day. As anybody, I mean, you must be meeting yourself coming back in the opposite direction in terms of International Women's Day events, of course. Absolutely, it does. Where this comes from is IOD is actually running an event. Our colleagues in Northern Ireland are running a global Women in Leadership conference. And they ran the first part of that. They split it over 2 afternoons, and the first part was yesterday, and second part is tomorrow afternoon. And as part of that, IOD across the UK with our partners have been running events to basically kind of be collaborative and to align with those events as well. So almost a kind of fringe session, if you like, if you want to think about it in that way. So the event, an amazing lineup of that national event. It's sold out, I'm afraid to say, fully booked, because tomorrow they've got Jane Goodall. Dame Jane Goodall is one of their speakers. So a really stellar lineup that they've had, but it is all being recorded. So you'll be able to kind of catch up with sessions later. But if you want to follow along on the discussion on that on social media, it's WLC 2022 is the hashtag. So if you want to kind of check in on that, please do. I mean, IOD itself, we're doing lots of work across the IOD and specifically here in Scotland around how we both ensure that our members, who are all board members, board directors, non-execs, chairs, trustees, chief executives, how the IOD can support them in their director roles, because the IOD itself, our focus is on great governance, and supporting directors in their own professional development and learning. We obviously operate the Chartered Director Programme and so on. So working really hard to do more on that across the IOD and in Scotland. In Scotland itself, we've established a diversity, equity and inclusion programme of work, where our 7 branches across Scotland are coming together and thinking about what we can do at both a branch level and also at a Scotland-wide level. We've got an amazing group of ambassadors who are kind of bringing their expertise and insight and experience around that. And in particular, what we're keen to do as part of that is look at this through an intersectional approach. So making sure that it's in terms of our work around inclusion and diversity, that absolutely there is an intersectional approach taken to that from the very beginning of that work. So we've got a lot to do. There is certainly more to do around that, but we're feeling very determined, I think is the word, to do that and to do that well. So the collaboration and partnerships like this one with Women on Boards is a huge part of that. So this evening, the format for this session is that I'll be handing over to Julie in 1 second, and delighted to see that Julie is our Vice Chair of IOD in Scotland. She is the Chair of the IOD Scotland, Edinburgh and Lothians branch, and she also happens to be the Scotland lead for Women on Boards. So she's the woman, right? To be kind of hosting this, and she's going to then introduce our fabulous speakers, Lisa and Sosha, and then we'll hear from them, and then we'll have a kind of a Q&A. So please do just contribute to the chat function, but there will be a chance for questions and for engagement as well. So, because that's really important, that we want to hear from you and hear about your experiences and your reflections as well on our topic this evening. And we hope that this event will be, as I say, first of a number with women on boards, and we hope that we can continue this conversation with each of you. So on that note, I'm going to hand over to Julie. I can now kind of focus on moving into listening mode and learning from each of you, which is always a joy. So Julie, I'll pass to you. Thanks.
Thanks very much, Louise. And for those of you that aren't members of Women on Boards UK, I'll just tell you a little bit about us. We are also a membership organisation, as is the IOD, but we're an organisation that supports all underrepresented groups on their journey to the boardroom, and in particular, that journey towards being a non-executive director. We have over 40,000 individual and corporate members, all of whom support each other and contribute, but we basically hold a wide range of events and seminars, including how to get started as a non-exec, how to write your CV, what happens when you get an interview, and events such as this, which we call really a boardroom insight. We hear from those who are currently serving as non-executives and what it's like and what their journey has been. So we're trying all the time to make it more accessible. If you're an experienced director, we also have space for you. We have directors' circles where we discuss topics that are relevant to the board at the moment. And we work with many organisations on how they increase their diversity and their inclusion. And we also really importantly advertise non-executive vacancies. And that's really important, because one of the reasons that people don't apply to be a non-exec is because they don't know where the roles are. So do take a look at our website. It's open to all. You can join for free, or you can pay, and if you like, go behind the wall. Now, before I move on to our speakers, Louise mentioned that it is in fact International Women's Day and that we're all busy, but one of the things Women on Board does in that week is that we launch a bursary programme each year, and that's for 6 women to become full members of Women on Boards who otherwise wouldn't be able to afford it. So they get their annual membership, they get access to our Get On Board workshop, our vacancy board, they get help with their CV, interview support, and a whole range of other things that amounts to around £1,500. So if you know of anyone, or if you feel yourself that you might benefit from that bursary, I know Catherine's put the link up, have a look to see whether you can access it, whether it's right for you. It's open to all females, non-binary, trans, those who identify as female. You just need to have an income below £30,000 over the last 12 months. So yes, do take a look at that link in the chat. But for now, we're going to hear from 2 ladies, IOD member and Women on Boards member, who were going to talk to us about their boardroom journeys to being a non-executive. And within that, as Louise was saying, if you've got questions, fantastic. There will be time to talk to both Dr. Sorka Hume and Lisa Tennant as after they've spoken. If you've got questions, pop them in the chat and I'll do my best to ask them when they finish speaking. So I'm going to hand over now to Sosha. There you go, Sosha, over to you.
Thank you very much. Just make sure I'm not on mute. The dogs just stopped barking, thankfully. So, and thanks, Catherine, for popping up my slide. It was just to, I'm representing a mountain biking charity, so it makes sense that I am going to show you a picture of some nice mountain biking. So good evening, delighted to be here with you all and a little in awe of the company I find myself in. As Julie said, I'm Sorsha, I'm CEO of Friends at the End, and a trustee of a charity called Gravitate Northeast. I don't really see my story as anything special, but I hope that perhaps by sharing it, some of you might see the value and the fun to be had by joining a board of trustees. So my story starts with a friend who was big into mountain biking took me along to a mountain biking film night organised by a local charity called Gravitate Northeast back in Aberdeen. I was a charity manager at the time and found myself listening to the presentations from the board and thinking, I wonder if they could use my help. They introduced themselves to the audience and it appeared that none of the board had any prior charity experience. And guess what else the trustees all had in common? Yes, they were all men, of course. I decided to reach out to the chair of the charity and we met for coffee where I outlined my experience. I'm a medical doctor having transitioned to the third sector with an additional qualification in fundraising. We agreed that I would have a look through their business plan and see if there was anything missing in the fundraising section. A test, I thought. I am good at tests. I made some suggestions to the business plan and then was invited along to attend one of their board meetings. Although everyone was very welcoming, I felt a little lost in this first meeting as discussion was framed around land access, trail building, community asset transfer, and other magical things. But then I started to understand the language as talk turned to fundraising, awareness raising, income generation, terms I understood. Suddenly, I found myself piping up in this room full of strangers and offering to do X, Y, and Z. I continued to attend board meetings as an observer and began to work with the chair on a fundraising strategy when he asked me if I would like to officially become a trustee. Here was me, not even owning a mountain bike, now on the board of trustees of a mountain biking charity. Now that was 3 years ago and I really honestly haven't looked back. So to give you a bit of background, Gravitate Northeast was set up by a group of mountain bikers in Aberdeen, frustrated with the lack of facilities in the region. They decided to set up their own charity and do something about it. In the early days, they had various successful crowdfunding campaigns, first to undergo a feasibility study to identify the best site for a trail centre, and later to undergo various planning studies. We're now working closely with a range of partners, including Opportunity Northeast, Northeast Adventure Tourism, Developing Mountain Biking in Scotland, and Forestry and Land Commission to make this dream a reality. So what are we up to at the moment? We're busy updating our business plan. We've got a number of planning studies underway and we're pulling together a large funding application for about a 6-figure sum and hope to submit a planning application later this year. So what has this experience taught me? Well, for a start, that I actually really enjoy mountain biking. I've since bought myself a bike and I've joined a mountain biking social group in Edinburgh recently. Secondly, I've made friends. The Gravitate guys are a great bunch and we've had some great nights out as well as great board meetings. I also believe genuinely that I wouldn't have had the courage to apply for my current role if I hadn't already put myself out there in a big way by reaching out to the chair at Gravitate. In both cases, I was entering a completely new field for me with so many unknowns. But realizing that I didn't have to be an expert on the subject to add value to an organization gave me the confidence to apply for the CEO role at Friends at the End. So what did I wish I had known in advance? Well, just how rewarding and often fun it would be. I've truly made friends for life and I've learned new skills in trail maintenance and business planning, to name just a few. Also, just how welcoming people would be. As a trustee, you're giving up your time for free and people genuinely really appreciate that. And to reiterate the point I made earlier, you really don't need to be an expert on the subject matter to add value. Just bring your skills and your experience to the table, be willing to get stuck in and learn, and I guarantee you'll get more out of it than you put in. So what tips would I give to anyone considering joining a board? Essentially, just go for it. You may already have an idea of what organisation or cause you'd like to support, but if not, however, have a think about what you enjoy outside of work. What causes do you care about? What community would you like to be a part of? And what are your particular skills? There's nothing more rewarding than being able to put your hand up in a board meeting and say, I can help with that. So what's next? The Gravitate project is moving fast and the next few years will be critical to our success in the long run. As I mentioned earlier, we hope to submit a planning application later this year and have already adopted a number of trails in the forest, which we're in the process of making safe and improving where possible. Unfortunately, progress on this has been slower than we had initially hoped due to the damage caused by the various storms. It's an exciting time for us, however, and I can't wait to see how the project develops. Although I'm based in Edinburgh these days, I can still zoom into meetings once a fortnight. In fact, I've got a board meeting directly after this session. Thanks so much for listening to my ramblings. Happy to answer any questions. My email address is also on the slide if anyone would like to contact me privately, and I would be delighted to hear from you. Thank you.
Sorka, that was brilliant. Thank you. Well done. I particularly love that you started by going, I didn't think I was anything special. And I think that speaks to us all. We all think we just our own experience and that other people are kind of more wow than we are. And actually, you're all wow, if you like. You also talked to us about how you just picked up the phone. And that is absolutely the right thing to do. So if any of you have a charity, particularly for charitable trustee roles, if you have a charity that you're particularly enthusiastic about, you're interested in, and there are thousands, pick up the phone. Because they just don't know what vacancies are coming up. And the other thing that you really highlighted was this idea of what I call transferable skills. How you've got one thing that you know in one sector, and then you discover it's hugely applicable somewhere else. So that was absolutely terrific. And I love the fact that it gave you confidence to apply something else. Thank you for that. I'm sure there'll be lots of questions, Sorka, but before we come back to you and to questions, I'm going to ask Lisa if she wouldn't mind sharing something of her journey.
Sure. Can you hear me okay?
Yep.
Good, thank you. I'm nowhere near as well prepared as Saoirse, so forgive me for that. I tend to wing it with these things, and you'll see when I tell you my boardroom story, that's exactly how I got my first board position, and it's continued that way ever since. So just to reassure as well on that subject of, you know, I'm nothing special. So I grew up in quite a disadvantaged background and left school at 16 with very little to go and work in a factory. So I don't come from the same background as a lot of my boardroom colleagues. I'm a single parent, I have a disability, and I have 2 children, one of whom has special needs. And I have been able to develop a portfolio of paid board roles, which has been fantastic. And I say that just to let you know that, you know, nothing has held me back in that regard, and I hope that it would be the same for you. At the moment, I've got 3 non-exec roles, and I chair a national arts organisation. I've been a non-exec now for 11 years, so I started when I was 34, and I realised the other day, I'm not very happy about this, I've now served 10,000 hours in the boardroom. So I think I have some expertise as a non-exec, but I also think, how could I have been sitting on my backside for 10,000 hours in a boardroom? Anyway, okay, so my first board role, after working in various jobs, I set up my own business when I was in my 20s. And over time and through a lot of luck, that grew quite well. And I sold it in my early 30s. Started doing a bit of consulting for the third sector. So at that time, it's still true now, but the third sector really needed help from people with commercial skills to start to develop social enterprise and income generation rather than just relying on fundraising. And I did quite a few of those types of projects. I was working full time as a CEO on a third sector project when my father became terminally ill. And at that same time, I was approached by the chairman of the local NHS board, who was looking for new non-execs for the role. The people that I was working with at the time when I was a CEO were a bunch of very difficult characters who I will not name. And the chairman, I think, had seen that I was fairly good at managing some of these difficult characters and thought that might be a skill that was useful in the NHS. So I went through the public appointments process, same as everyone else. You might have questions on that process later. The public appointments process is competency based. I'm a big fan of that. And what that means is when you're filling out your application, you will demonstrate in paragraphs how you meet the skills for the role. And the reason that I like it is because you don't have to have been a non-exec to demonstrate those skills. You just have to be able to demonstrate them from somewhere in your life. And I was able to do that through other life experiences. Interviewed for the role. The interview was quite challenging. Was offered the job and took it. And I will be very honest, I really didn't know what a non-exec did at all. I just turned up to work. And it was quite an eye-opener for me. I can still remember my first board meeting, how embarrassing it was, all the things that I said wrongly. I was sent for an induction, and I was sent on the same induction as the new porters and cleaners. And so my non-exec induction consisted of, here's where the fire exits are, here's what we do in an emergency. And my second day in the job, I was handed the chair of a committee. And I thought, all the training I've had is where the fire exits are. However, baptism by fire, I soon learned, and one of the things that I will come on to is, you really, really need the right people around you when you start. You need the right training and the right help. And at the time when I started, it wasn't really available like it is now. So I'm afraid I had to rely on colleagues and my own wits. My father's illness progressed, and I felt that I could not manage the NHS board role alongside a demanding CEO role. So I stood down from my executive job thinking, I'll do a bit of this non-exec work when I can get my head around it, and I'll come back to being the CEO after I'm done with that. That's never happened, as I said. It's been nearly 11 years now, never gone back to the day job. I'm not sure that I will now. I quite quickly picked up another non-exec role, which was on the board of the Scottish Police Authority. So the SPA had just been formed at that time to merge the Scottish Police Forces. It was quite a high profile merger. Some people will probably remember it. It was all over the press for many years. And 3 weeks into that job, I was asked to chair the group that would oversee the merger. So basically to be responsible for reporting to the board for the merger of the 9 police forces. Something that I'm glad that I did not know was that there can be quite a reputational issue to think about sometimes with boards. And knowing what I know now, I'm quite sure I would not have accepted the challenges that were put in front of me. But I thought it was all very exciting. I've joined this board, I've been asked to chair this merger. This is great, it'll look good on my CV. That was the most difficult thing I've ever done in my life. And I still bear the scars of it. I'm very glad I did it. It was a huge learning curve, but I was completely naive to that, to the reputational issues, the political issues, working at that level, governance issues. And again, I threw myself into it and I learned on the job, and it's proven to be a fantastic addition to my CV. It's something that I'm asked about regularly when I interview for roles, particularly roles where there might be something difficult in the background. So I guess I'm also saying, don't necessarily shy away from something that might be challenging, because you're always thinking, next time I go for one of these competency-based jobs, will this be giving me something to talk about? And you know, that's years and years ago now, and I still regularly use that as an example of something that I have worked through, something challenging. That portfolio grew to 6 roles, and I worked in those all the time. I was looking after my father. After he passed away, I was enjoying the roles so much that I continued, and I've served terms, come off, gone on to other organisations, moved into private sector board roles. I've done quite a variety. I went on to train as a chair through the Scottish Government Chairs Programme, and I'm enjoying that progression now into chairing committees and chairing boards. What did I wish that I knew? My big mistake when I started was that I did not understand the difference between executive and non-executive. And I went into the NHS with great enthusiasm, which I still have. I'm actually passionate about the NHS. But that passion translated into me saying, but why? But why is it like this in this hospital? And why is this ward like that? And why don't we move the theatre? And why don't we talk to the surgeons about working different hours? And in all honesty, that's not how it works in the NHS. And it's also not the job of a non-executive. I think that was further complicated because my father was being treated in those hospitals. And so I literally was coming along with examples saying, this process isn't joined up, and I know that because of this personal experience. And colleagues would look at me like quite awkwardly, and I'd think, oh, said the wrong thing there. That wasn't my place to say that. So the job of the non-executive is to be strategic and to provide governance and assurance. And so getting into the operational detail of something is just the opposite of being strategic. And that, I think, can be quite challenging for the new board director to learn, whether it's as a trustee in a charity or a non-executive on something like an NHS board or a private company. You've got all this expertise from your day job career, and that's what you feel you want to bring. And actually, that's not what's needed. And that was the steepest learning curve for me, that move to, it's my job to advise, to support, to mentor, to coach, to steer, to ask the challenging questions, but to ask them in the right way. And it is not my job to do the day job, to delve into the operational detail, to get hung up on any of that. I think that is, you can partly learn that through training, and I'm sure IOD and WOB can help with that. But I also think it's something you learn on the job, particularly from observing your colleagues and your more experienced board colleagues and how they deal with those situations. When I go onto a new board now, I'll do a lot of listening at the start and picking up what's the culture in this particular board before I will be giving a lot of contribution. The other thing that I did at the start too was, and I've heard a lot of newer non-execs say this, I have to be earning my money. I've got to be earning my day rate. So I have to be saying something. I have to say something about every item that comes along, and I better be something good. And I used to literally sit in meetings and get a sore jaw because I was sitting there so tense thinking, think of something good to say so that they feel they got value for money today. And it's not necessary. It's not. And I think that, once you've been there again for a while and feel a little bit more experience, you can say, I've nothing to contribute on this one, or, my colleagues have said it all, I agree with them. Save it for when you have some real value to add and don't feel that pressure of being the new person. What else? I've worked through 2 pregnancies, 2 rounds of breastfeeding at work. I think that attitudes have changed. In the 11 years since I started this, attitudes are definitely better than they were. However, there's still a long way to go, unfortunately. And I don't say that to put you off, but what I would encourage you to do, that I did not do, is to be quite robust. And if I was in situations now that I was in 6, 7, 8 years ago when I had small children, or I was breastfeeding a baby in a board meeting, I would deal with that completely differently. You're well within your rights to ask for the accommodations that you need, and you should expect those to be delivered. When I was left with nowhere to breastfeed or sent to a toilet, or had to take one employer to tribunal to get maternity pay, I doubt very much that it's still like that because things have changed so much, but I was not confident in doing that in the way that I would be now. And I think it's right to be confident. If organisations say that they want to have women on their boards, then they need to do what it takes to support having women on their boards, whatever that might be. I've got a disability, I'm autistic. I was diagnosed as autistic a few years ago because one of my children was diagnosed. I hear this quite commonly. People realise when they're an adult when one of their children's diagnosed. For a few years, I did not tell anyone on boards that I was autistic, and I did not declare it on any application forms or disability monitoring forms. I felt it was too risky, and I felt that I would be discriminated against, and people would say, how can you do your board role if you're autistic? How can you deal with people? How can you deal with politics and influencing and all these sorts of things? I always say it now, because again, I feel like I have a duty to say it. If you want to see more diversity on your board, then you have to be prepared to speak up, and it's part of my responsibility to speak up. I try to speak up for what I need. If I need an accommodation now, I try to ask for it. Sometimes I get it, sometimes I don't. But I do feel a personal responsibility to do that. I don't feel that it's particularly held me back. So again, what I would say is I just encourage you to be as forthright as you can. In summary, what I would say is start early. I did start quite early, only by coincidence, as I've said. If I was doing it all over again, I'd have started sooner. I honestly think it's never too early to start. And the way that I recommend people start, if they don't have board level experience in their current role, is to take a volunteer job as a trustee. Saoirse's talked about how interesting that can be. And what that does is starts to give you the building blocks for those paragraphs that you will put in your competency-based applications. So I would strongly encourage you to do that. There's also a lot of good training that comes with that. SCVO and others will give really good training on trustee, which is relevant to whichever board you might go on to in the future. And take advantage of everything that I did not have. Find yourself a mentor. If it hadn't been for a couple of the mentors I had in my difficult days in the police authority, I would never have continued being a non-exec, and I never would have survived that role. They really were that crucial to me. And don't be scared to ask someone to help you with that. Take advantage of WOB and IOD. The training's phenomenal. I've had so much support with WOB. Even now, if I'm going for a role, went for a role a few months ago in a sector that I didn't know, and I can't tell you how overwhelming the support was. You know, they found me 2 people who worked in that industry at a very high level, who knew the role that I was going for, and let me speak to them. So never be afraid to ask there. The support is absolutely invaluable. Oh, and don't stop applying. I've now applied for 250 board roles, and I think I've done 15 now. And don't be put off. Just don't be put off if you're not getting an interview. If you get an interview, don't get the role. Absolutely don't be put off. Ask for feedback. It is a long process, and I won't lie, it's quite competitive. So you have to, I think, have that little bit of inner resilience that says, this is something I really want to do. I'll keep applying, and in the background, I'll keep building my skills. I've always got in mind what I'm going to say in an application and what I'm going to say during an interview. So I'm always building my strategy skills and my governance skills, anything else I think might be relevant to my board roles. So that's it. I can hear a small child crying, so I will stop talking now. Thank you.
Lisa, thank you so much. 10,000 hours. That's really going some. One of the things that Lisa was saying there was the absolute value in your lived experience, whether that's where you come from or the person that you are. And, you know, it's really important, particularly when you're thinking about being a non-executive director, that you don't just think, oh, the skills that I've got are the skills that belong to my workplace. No, they're not. The skills that you have in the non-executive space are your skills, and part of your skills is your lived experience. I also, again, we heard from Lisa, as we did from Sorka, how skills transfer from one sector. She talked about third sector skills benefiting from her commercial experience. And of course, that public appointments process, which, even though it's much better than it has been in the past, is still very much like treading treacle to some degree. But lots of people who know, including Lisa, who know all about the public appointments, will come back to that. What I would just say is, if you've got questions for Sorka and for Lisa, please begin to put them in the chat, or you know, put your name in there, and then I can come to you. Lisa, you also talked about your most challenging role being the police there, and I love it that we've highlighted that difference between the executive and the non-executive. I always think that we shouldn't be called NXDs; they should just be called not directors, because you're not the executive. The clue's in the title, isn't it? The non-executive director. So you're not the one with all the answers. So Catherine, if you don't mind bringing us back together. Sorka, Lisa was talking there about hello, her most difficult role. Sorka, what has been your most challenging part of being a director?
I guess it was coming into a completely new sector with a completely different set of language. I mean, I didn't understand what that first board meeting I went to. They could have been speaking Spanish, you know, and I don't speak Spanish. It was just yeah, the discussion points I didn't understand at all. So having to really get up to speed with the subject matter quite quickly was quite difficult. But it was, I guess, similar to Lisa saying that, you know, when you start with those first few meetings, it's really listening and not trying to rush in to say something and be of use and be of value, and actually listen and learn and understand. And there will be a point where you can pipe up and say, actually, I know something about that. And for me, it was the kind of fundraising side of things because it is, you know, Gravitate is a registered charity. So that was where I could add value. And I still don't understand half of what they talk about when it comes to community asset transfer and trail building and inspection. And they're talking about digging trail pits for the car park. And I zone out in these points, but I know there'll be a point in the meeting where I can add value and help in the ways that I can. I don't need to understand everything that's being said, because there are other people in the room that have those bases covered.
Thanks very much for that. If any of you do want to ask a question, now I can see you all again,